The Ohio State Buckeyes, man, this was a weird year for the Ohio State Buckeyes, man, as far as their 2020 season. You're talking about a season which was almost canceled. The season was almost canceled for them, because of COVID. Obviously that was started by the Big Ten. Well, it was started by the MAC, but then the Big Ten director came out, canceled the season. Then the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12 kind of stood their ground, made the Big Ten kind of look like fools a little bit. And then the Big Ten announced that, yeah, late October, that's when we're going to be coming back, and it was a crap show. It was a shit show. They were canceled games. They really couldn't reschedule because of limited time. Because of limited time that the playoff schedule had. It was just a hot mess, and um, not to mention that COVID hit almost every big team there. And you just felt like, more specifically for the Ohio State Buckeyes, it definitely hit them the most. And you really felt like Ohio State was probably going to miss the playoffs, not because of who they were going against, or because the amount of, or maybe because of their performance against some of those teams, but the short games, right? People thought that A&M could make the playoffs, and we all know A&M should never make the playoffs, but A&M was kind of expected to go there because Ohio State's shortened schedule. They didn't have enough games. Ohio State played five regular season games, including the Big Ten championship game. And I don't know if that just was enough to compete with some of those teams. Now, obviously, Ohio State, the playoff committee, they were able to do it. Ohio State, in a way, did their job. They won the Big Ten. They beat Northwestern, and they got into the playoffs. And going against the Clemson Tigers, they did their job. They did their job at the end of the day. Justin Fields, who I'm not gonna sit here. I'm not gonna sit up here and say that he had a mediocre season, but compared to how he was in 2019, he was off to a very, very fast start. But then there were games like the Indiana game where he threw three interceptions, and then there was the Northwestern game. He did not play well in that game as well. But then there were other games like the Clemson game. He showed up in that game, right? He had an all-time great performance, and right, in a way, it was kind of a legendary performance because he got hurt. He got hurt really, really hard, um, by one of the by James Skalski. Almost took him out the game. Came back and put on a show. Six touchdowns, six total touchdowns. Justin Fields put on an absolute clinic against the team that beat them the last year. A team that were former national champions, almost back to back national championship champions. And now, again, for Ohio State to get to that road of going to a net of going not only going to a national championship, potentially winning one, you had to go through Clemson. And Justin Fields definitely did it, playing through, with heroic effort. So Ohio State went through a lot of adversity. Again, their season was almost canceled. So many players that were gone from COVID, and Ohio State got that monkey off their back by beating the Clemson Tigers, kind of upsetting the world. But then the Alabama game came, and I was the one person that went with Ohio State. You don't see a lot of Alabama fans kind of go up, but because I try to be as much objective as possible, I just thought that with that momentum that they have with Clemson, I thought Ohio State could shock Alabama. Now I was wrong, and in a way, I was glad to be wrong. But you look at the Ohio State Buckeyes; they were just kind of, they were outmanned. Obviously, Ohio State lost two very, very, really, huge players. They lost guys like Tyreek Smith and Tommy Toa, which was huge. They lost their kicker, and not to mention that Justin Fields was hurt. Trey Sermon was out on the first play of the game after a big hit by Christopher Allen and Christian Harris. It was just not a good look, and then they were just outmanned, right? You look at the outside cornerback positions, moving a guy like Sean Wade, a guy that was a projected first round pick at the nickel position. You move him to the outside, he was just toast, and really it was all season he got toast. But he really got burnt by Devontae Smith, Sevin Banks, who had a lot of potential, but just you felt like he just wasn't really ready to step up and be one of those guys at the outside cornerback positions, like that Damon Arnett, Jeffrey Okuda type of bloodline of number two guys that are now known as number one guys next year. You just didn't really see that from him. Um, you saw a lot of young guys that has a lot of playing experience, but they're more solid rotational players. They need to kind of step up and be those next superstar players, and that's just kind of what Ohio State was missing from their defense. They were missing from their defense. Offensively, again, they didn't really show up until like the last couple of games of the season as far as just being consistent and as far as showing that those huge type of playmaking roles. Obviously, they brought in Trey Sermon, who was from the spring, and he stepped up and he was the man. That Northwestern game, we rushed for 300 yards. He kind of showed that Ezekiel Elliott type of stamp where, yeah, I'm the man. And then he replicated the same performance against Clemson as far as, almost, I think he had a 200-yard game against them. And obviously losing that kind of the alpha male type of leader in your locker room presence then on the football field in the first play of the game, that's a big loss. That's a big loss, especially in a championship game against Alabama. And obviously for the Ohio State Buckeyes, a lot has happened. A lot hit them, but they made it. They got destroyed by Alabama, but they made it to the national championship. They almost got the job done. And obviously going into 2021, they're going to have huge expectations again. You do lose Justin Fields, you lose you lose Davis, Toa guy, he's going to be gone as well. Sean Wade is going to be gone. But then you look at some, and then obviously Baron Browning, Turf Barland, those guys are also going to be gone as well. But looking at some of the other players, your defensive line is still going to be loaded with Tyreek Smith, Zachary Harrison, and obviously with Haskell Garrett. Offensive line is going to be loaded. They're going to have the deepest receiving core in the country with Chris Olave, especially leading the charge with Chris Olave, who he's coming back. That is crazy in my opinion, but he's coming back, and he can definitely have a big year and try to get that team to a national championship. The quarterback position is the biggest question. Is it going to be CJ or is it going to be Kyle McCord? That's the question. Obviously Ryan Day, he's known as being the quarterback guru. You saw what he did with Justin Fields, a guy that has extreme talent but limited playing experience, and he ended up turning Justin Fields into a monster. The same thing can be said about these two 5-star quarterbacks. So they got to figure out what they want to do in the quarterback position. Here's the good thing. You got spring and fall camp. Ohio State barely had fall camp, and they didn't have any spring camp at all. So obviously, Ohio State is going to go through a much, much easier process compared to how they were back in 2020. Matter of fact, you can make an argument that what they went through in 2020 is going to help them out even more because of them going through that difficult process and the fact that they still went through all that controversy, and they went through all that hardship and still made it to a national championship and almost won it. That is, you gotta, from a mental perspective, you feel like the players that were on that 2020 team, they feel like, they probably feel like they are on a mission, that they feel like they were that close, and that maybe it kind of brings the locker room and the coaching, it brings everyone together that much closely, and they can actually go in there and compete for potentially another national championship type of run. Again, their schedule, I think, is going to be a little bit more easier. I think that their players and the experience is there. The coaching staff is obviously there. It's up to Ohio State at this point for them to kind of step up and grab that national championship.